Hey guys, welcome to my channel. You can see that I have all kinds of orchids in front of me. We will not explain how to grow and maintain orchids in this video. If you want to learn the cultivation of various orchids, you can click on my channel. We have a playlist of videos which talk about orchid care. In this video, we will show you how to use orchids to decorate your lives. These orchids can be used for various occasions or festivals. Recently, I helped a friend to organize his wedding. The scale of the wedding was relatively small, with about 5 tables, and we put a centerpiece in the middle of each one. For wedding centerpieces, live plants are generally used. These flowers are used to decorate the wedding venue for the guest enjoyment. We can also have a game like a quiz or a raffle. Whoever wins at each table gets the centerpiece. This is also used to thank the guest who came to the wedding. For these centerpieces, we thought of several options at first. The centerpiece is an important part of the decor and cannot be cheap. In general, many flowers bought in various supermarkets or garden centers are not suitable, because that gives an impression which is too ordinary and too cheap. We thought about using some bonsai at one point. I went to a nearby bonsai shop and took a look. Good-looking bonsai can cost hundreds or even thousands of dollars, which is very expensive. Our budget was $100 per table. A bonsai under $100 is a small tree and is very unremarkable. So then we decided to decorate with orchids. Orchids are less expensive, but not very cheap. Generally, medium-sized orchids fall between $30 and $80. We bought these orchids in stores which specialize in orchids, and greenhouses like these are relatively rare. These orchids include Vanda, Onstadium, Dendrobium, Paphiopedilum, and phalaenopsis. We ended up going with orchids because they were within the budget while still being interesting. I believe that most guests will be pleasantly surprised after seeing this. I think orchids are a great flower to use for any occasion. I have been to many orchid shops, orchid shows, and I have grown hundreds of orchids myself. But every time I go to an orchid show, I see orchids that I have never seen before. There will be surprises every time. So if you want to decorate your living environment or giving someone a special gift, orchids are a good choice. Now let's make the orchid arrangement. Orchids have a long blooming period, and some orchids can bloom for a month or two. I have a sleeper orchid that has been open for over a year. These two Paphiopedilum orchids are different varieties and should be able to open for several weeks. They also have a bud which has not yet opened. After buying an orchid, we can maintain its flowering period through several means. We can place them in a shady environment with bright diffused light, water them normally, and refrain from fertilizing them in order to preserve the blooms. Most importantly, do not repot orchids during flowering. If you change the pot, it can cut the flowering period short or even cause the flowers to drop immediately. We usually repot after flowering is finished, if the media is degraded or if the orchid has outgrown its pot. These orchids were originally grown in plastic pots, but plastic pots are ugly, so we need to use other containers to decorate them. I used this green planter to hold the two Paphiopedilum orchids. We put the Spanish moss in it. Take a look at the two sleeper orchid together. Isn't it cute? There are more leaves under this, which feels more substantial. The two little flowers above are cute. Our budget is $100, and here we are decorating with 2 pots of Paphiopedilum. If you have a larger budget and a larger table, you can use a few more pots of orchids and put them in larger containers. That way, it will be prettier and more spectacular. When choosing a sleeper orchid, make sure that the flowers are not at the same height. The flowers of the Paphiopedilum should be high and low, which is more layered. And we put it in, we can fill the empty space with Spanish moss to secure the orchid. If you don't want to use Spanish moss, you can fill the empty space with newspaper. Finally, I cover the surface with reindeer moss. The reindeer moss is lumpy and fluffy. This Paphiopedilum is now ready to go. Now let's assemble the phalaenopsis. When I went to Hobby Lobby, I was pleasantly surprised to find this little wooden wheelbarrow. I bought 2 for our phalaenopsis. We can align the containers and the flowers in the same direction, and will give people an impression of unified motion in one direction. We could also put it this way, with the wheelbarrows facing each other, and the orchid flowers spread out on both sides. This shape also works, and the final result mainly depends on your personal preference. We fixed these orchids in the same way with the moss and covered the surface with reindeer moss. For the Onstadium, we will use this bathtub as a container. The edge of this bathtub is copper, which matches the color orange and yellow hues of the flowers. We fixed these orchids in the same way with the Spanish moss, and covered the surface with reindeer moss. This ceramic pot is the most commonplace of our containers, and I think that this white container matches the two Dendrobium orchids best. Let's put the orchids in and see how it looks. This pot, combined with this Dendrobium, creates the sensation of rising from the ground. The bottom of the Dendrobium orchid is relatively empty, so we can use this air plant to decorate it. Now let's assemble the Vanda orchid. This Vanda orchid is relatively tall, so we will use a relatively deep wooden box. Put the orchid directly in and fill it with moss. The bottom of the Vanda orchid is a bit empty. We can use this larger air plant to embellish it. Finally, let's summarize what we have done in this video. I assembled a total of 5 centerpieces. For each table, we choose different kinds of orchids, and each orchid also has a corresponding container. Everyone will have their own subjective opinion about what looks best, as everyone's aesthetics are different and we can choose different containers according to our own preferences. In the process of this creation, I felt great joy. I was very happy when I found this wheelbarrow, as it was perfect for my phalaenopsis. Throughout the creative process, you can choose a variety of containers and buy them to try out. Unsuitable containers can then be returned. For example, when I was in Hobby Lobby, I saw this bird cage. I was thinking of putting this Paphiopedilum in a bird cage. It would be more interesting. But when I tried it, I found that the flower of the Paphiopedilum was taller than the bird cage, so it couldn't fit in it. I will return this bird cage. I also saw this wooden panel at the time, and I thought I could fix this window-like panel to the back of the Vanda. Once you attach the Vanda to this frame, it gives a completely different impression like that of a painting. But I came back and tried it and found that the window was too small for the orchid to fit. So this has to be returned as well. While assembling the pots, I found that this Spanish moss produces a lot of debris, which stuck to my clothes. There was also a lot of dust, and I noticed that the inside of my nose and my hands had turned green. Therefore, it is recommended that everyone wear work clothes and preferably a mask and gloves when operating. That's for today's video. I hope it helps and inspires you. These orchids arrangements can not only be used to decorate various occasions, but can also be used as gifts. If you like this video, please thumbs up. If you have not subscribed yet, please subscribe. We will have more interesting, useful, and free videos in the future. If you have any questions or suggestions, please leave them below. Thank you for watching. See you next time.